Hey, what's up? So this video will be a lot more rambly than usual because I just need to get this off my chest. So I'm just turning on the camera and going. And I want to talk about the movie The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. It's the third one in the Conjuring series based on the real life cases of Ed and Lorraine Warren, these demonologist ghost hunters who went and responded to actual families saying that they were haunted and went and hung out with them and said that there were like ghosts and demons and stuff there. And then the movies, the Conjuring series, are basically just like, what if those cases were like real and they just like make them real and actually make demons be in the house and this big old face off and all that. That's the Conjuring movie series. But the real life Warrens have been exposed for stretching the truth to just straight up lying again and again and again throughout their career. And so I kept getting YouTube ads for this third film, The Devil Made Me Do It.
You okay there? Jesus.
I think I hurt someone.
And it made me interested in the real story. And so I went into this deep rabbit hole searching all the actual facts of this case. Yes, it's based on a real trial that was called by the media the Devil Made Me Do It trial. In 1981 in Brookfield, Connecticut, Arne Johnson killed Alan Bono and said the devil made him do it, that he was possessed by a demon and it killed the man for him, and so he was innocent. And his lawyer tried to argue this, but the judge immediately shot it down, and he was convicted for first-degree manslaughter, but only served about 5 years of his sentence for good behavior. But this case was all over the news, all over the world. People were talking about this. And especially in the United States, it had a huge influence on the whole satanic panic that would take place. And people would point to this case as proof. See, look, Satanists are doing things. Satan even made this guy kill this guy. Also, the history of people claiming that the devil made them kill people. We often hear that framed as like, oh man, these guys are like really worshiping the devil and these guys are like part of these satanic cults. And no, actually, all those murders that said that the devil made them do things, it grew up in Christian families. They weren't in a satanic cult or group or whatever. They grew up in Christian households and were told that Satan makes you do bad things. And then when they did bad things, they determined, I guess it's Satan that made me do it. And often it's like their own inner shame that is plaguing them after each murder that they name Satan. Because that's how they're taught to interpret it by their Christian families. The whole satanic panic stuff about like actual satanic cults out there participating in ritual abuse, no evidence has ever been found of that, including the people who got famous by saying they used to be in one of those satanic cults. You'd ask them, okay, well, let's go find them since they're harming children, and be like, I don't know where they are anymore. That ain't that convenient. And a lot of these people ended up later admitting that they were lying about their whole story. The only real evidence we got of ritual abuse have been a few individuals who were kind of like using satanic ritual abuse as an excuse for their real abuse that they were participating in. And yeah, there are like groups out there that call themselves Satanists, but none of them are participating in ritual abuse. There have been no cases of that ever. Most of them are just like vibing, trying to fight Christian hegemony and promote freedom of religion. That's usually what most of them are doing. And most of them don't believe in a real Satan. Now I want to tell you a couple versions of this story because I find it extremely fascinating. First, the Warrens' version of the story with the demons and the devil and possession and all that. And then we're going to tell a slightly different version from the perspective of some others involved in this story. So the Warrens claim that first there was a boy named David, 11-year-old David, who was possessed by a demon, and the family called the Warrens over to help with this demon-possessed boy. Also, many family members every single night were trying to help keep this boy down because he was getting into these fits, and he couldn't sleep, and he was seeing things and seeing like old men and creepy monsters and screaming and saying quotes from the Bible and Paradise Lost. It was overwhelming for everybody. And so David's sister, Debbie, her boyfriend, Arne, who would later kill Alan Bono, started helping more and more with the family and even would help keep David down at night. And so the Warrens come in and they even bring multiple priests, multiple exorcisms happen. It doesn't seem to really help the boy. And then one day, Arne screams to David, or rather to the demon in David, "Come into me instead. Leave David alone." And then a couple months after that, Arne stabs Alan Bono like 20 times, 5 really fatal wounds, and he'll later die in the hospital. And it's because this demon took him over that he got from little David. And the Warrens come and say, well, we know what happened. We all were there. The demon went into you. And so let's try to tell them that it was the demon and that you're innocent. And it didn't work out. But there was a book deal that, of course, happened. Like happened with many of the Warrens cases. This book was The Devil in Connecticut. It also led to a docuseries that aired not that long after, and a movie back then starring Kevin Bacon, and then of course this other movie that just came out. The Warrens got rich. And now with that in mind, let's tell this story again with a little bit of a different perspective. Carl, David's older brother, was not in this movie because he is very much against the ways that the Warrens have depicted these events. And he claims it was all a hoax and that the Warrens exploited their family and that David was never possessed, that he just had a mental illness and that was really hard for the whole family. And he eventually recovered from that mental illness as time passed and as he continued to get treatment. Also, David's father would later admit that he never said David was possessed. And some of the local priests would also say there was never an exorcism. There was an investigation. They did meet with the family a couple times, but there was never an exorcism that they were a part of. Now let's give some details of this murder that make things a bit more interesting. So Debbie, David's sister, and her boyfriend Arne had moved out of the house because things had gotten so stressful. And Debbie had also just got this job at a dog kennel, grooming dogs. And the guy, Alan Bono, who owned the kennel, also had an apartment available adjacent to the kennel. And so Debbie and Arne moved in. And so Debbie's boss and landlord was the same person. Already pretty sketch. Kind of a stressful situation when your boss and your landlord is the same person. And then one day, Arne Johnson's sister, Wanda, and Debbie's 9-year-old cousin, Mary, was visiting the kennel, saying what's going on, hanging out. And that day, Alan Bono decided to take everybody out for lunch. So he took the 3 girls and Arne Johnson out. He had called in sick that day from work. And he proceeded to get really drunk. Really, really drunk. Comes back. Things are a little bit uncomfortable. So Debbie tells Wanda and Mary to go upstairs to the apartment area. And then Alan Bono goes up there. This is all according to Debbie's account and a bit of Wanda's account. Alan Bono goes up there, even more drunk, starts to get dangerous. And he grabs Mary, little 9-year-old Mary, and refuses to let go. At this point, Arne comes back in, is really angry, forces him to let go of little Mary. Debbie tries to get in between them as they start fighting. Arne apparently starts growling, and then the fight goes to the front yard, and Arne stabs Alan Bono about 20 times. This also was the first murder ever in Brookfield, Connecticut, and that was constantly talked about in the media around the case. And I hear that, and the first thing I think of is, you mean like the first murder of a rich white landlord? Is that what you mean? And Alan Bono actually had just come from Australia 6 months before, where he had owned a plantation for about 17 months, and his sister had owned the kennel, and she had asked him to come take over for a while. And so I'm not sure exactly how the connection was first made between Debbie and Alan Bono, but there's just some like weird details here of like the exploitation that may have been going on. Also, why is he holding on to Mary when he gets drunk? Like, there had to have been something there. We don't know what, but there was some mistreatment, some exploitation, and some abuse in the history of that relationship. And one day, Arne Johnson can't take it anymore. And in this stressful situation where Alan Bono is harming these girls, he loses control and he kills him. And then I imagine the Warrens see a chance to make some money and then go and coach Arne Johnson and the entire family to go along with this narrative. They probably sat them down and were like, hey, remember last time we were here? We're trying to get a demon out of David, but some of you were skeptical about it. Let's all agree that that was a demon and say that Arne told the demon to come into him. And you, Debbie, you also make sure you say that there was a few times where you felt a little weird and that he was growling a couple episodes of that before. And then say that the demon is what killed him. So make sure that you are especially clear that David was oppressed by this demon and possessed by this demon and saw all these things, and that you saw how much of a demonic influence he was dealing with as well. And so David, his reputation suffered quite a bit throughout all this, which is what got his brother Carl later extremely angry about this and how they ruined the life of David, because they got the whole family to talk about how possessed David was. But they had to get the whole family to go along with this narrative of how demonically possessed David was in order to argue that that demon then went into Arne, and therefore Arne is innocent. The brother Carl even said that it was really hard for David and the whole family to get past that, and that David couldn't have like any normal relationships, and that he and his brother even struggled to get work and to just get past this reputation. So I believe the Warrens told the family, hey, go along with this story, say this, say that, Arne, you too, go along with this, so that you could get off. And they did. But then when the judge shot it down, why didn't they just admit the truth then? Well, the Warrens also told the family that this story will make them millionaires because of the book deals and the movie deals and the TV deals, all that. And I'm sure they needed the money, and so they kept on going along with this story. And then the book came out, and according to Carl, the family only got $2,000 from that book deal. So then later in 2007, when there was going to be a reprinting of the book, Carl sued the publishing company and the Warrens, and then the book didn't get reprinted. And the publisher had said that they were just sick and tired of dealing with Carl, and they just didn't want to deal with it anymore. And so I think about this story, especially from these different angles of these added details, and I think how interesting it is that Arne Johnson was in this situation where he felt like the only way to get out of this isn't to argue for self-defense, to talk about the possible abuse that was going on, but the only way out of this is to say I was possessed by a demon. And like we said, this was the first murder in Brookfield, Connecticut, and it was of this rich landlord businessman. And I imagine he probably felt like everyone was just going to side with Alan Bono. There's no way out of this except to say I was possessed by a demon. And this is often why people blame demons. It's often because they feel like the only two choices that they have is to blame themselves for every problem in their life, or to blame some sort of outside spiritual invisible force. It's never the fault of the leaders or the bosses or the owners. It's always your fault for not taking responsibility, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and doing the right thing. Every failure you have is because of your fault alone, and every success you have is because of your effort alone. That's the narrative that we're often handed, and it benefits those in power who quite enjoy that no one's looking at them as the ones to blame for their problems. And because of this kind of propaganda that brainwashes us into thinking that every little thing is all our fault and our fault alone, it's difficult to articulate even how systems of power are to blame. We don't really have that kind of articulation easily available to us. And so we could either blame ourselves, it's all our fault, I should have just did better, or we could blame demons, we could blame Mercury being in retrograde, we could blame negative energy, we could blame all kinds of invisible forces to cope with our problems, so to avoid further blaming ourselves even more than we already do. It often is a coping mechanism. And the Warrens exploited that to try to get this family out of trouble. And it's so interesting to me that it didn't seem like an option to explore the abusive behavior of the man that he killed. That it seemed impossible. And so in this story, there's exploitation from every angle on this family. And I found that so much more fascinating than the retelling of the story where the devil actually did make him do it. So I went and watched the movie, and it was just like, I couldn't enjoy it because I'm like, the real story is so much more interesting. Also, the movie just completely left out Little Mary. She wasn't even in there. And Alan Bono was in there, and he was just like a drunk loser. It didn't really like show how exploitative and abusive he was, how much power he did have. It was just like, yeah, this guy, Alan Bono, some guy, and Arne Johnson got possessed by a demon. Then he stabbed him. And then the Warrens have to find the group of Satanists that brought this curse on this family and go confront them and battle them. And I was just like, the real story is so much more interesting than this nonsense. And it's like, yes, I know it's a movie, it's fiction, but come on, isn't this so much more fascinating? And so, if I could end this with any sort of solid point besides, isn't this interesting, which was the motivation for this video actually, I would say that we often are faced with either blame yourself or blame some outside invisible force, and often aren't given opportunities to articulate our real issues with societies that have failed us, systems of power that have oppressed us and marginalized us and made it difficult to survive and to self-actualize. There are so many outside forces within society that need to be paid attention to as sources for many of our issues, instead of just constantly being told to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, it's all your fault, or it's all in your brain and the chemicals. It's like, what about my horrible job and the way I'm being treated by my boss? What about lack of health care? What about lack of a living wage? What about racism? What about sexism? homophobia, transphobia, these real societal issues that must be dealt with instead of just constantly blaming myself or demons. I wish Arne Johnson and David's family had that opportunity before and after the killing of Alan Bono. That's all I gotta say. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe for more videos. And make sure you follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/whoisdamon. We've been streaming a lot more. And make sure you support me on Patreon. I'd really appreciate it. Patreon.com/Damon Garcia. And thank you, all my supporters who are already over there. Appreciate you very much. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.